Let's go and do some armchair travel. And in Wander the World today, we are really privileged to have an absolute legend of travel publishing with us in studio, Hilary Bradt. If you ever found yourself somewhere off the beaten path and in the days before the internet particularly reached for a guidebook to help you, the chances are it might have been one of Hilary's that you used, because just over 50 years ago, she and her then husband George wrote their first guidebook, a little typewritten guide to trekking in Peru and Bolivia. And all these years later, Bradt Travel Guides are known around the world. It is, in fact, the biggest independently owned travel publishing outfit in the UK and US in particular. And Hilary has had an extraordinary life that has taken her to every nook and cranny of this planet, just about. She's just released her own autobiography called Taking the Risk, My Adventures in Travel and Publishing. And she is here with us in studio today. What a privilege, and welcome to CapeTalk.
Thank you very much, Pippa.
Obviously, the book is full of incredible stories, from the jungle journeys to the early days of publishing to places that many people won't even have heard of. So there's a lot of ground for us to cover today. Hilary, take us back to that first book in 1974. I don't even know if book is the right word. I believed it was a hand-stapled guidebook. Is that true?
It was. I mean, people called it a pamphlet, which we thought was very rude because we thought it was a proper book. But we wrote it because we'd been trekking backpacking in Peru and Bolivia, and no one else knew where to go. There was no information then. And it was really prompted because we found this trail, this faint trail from near Cusco to Machu Picchu, which is now the Inca Trail and very famous. And we walked it, and people we met said, "You really must describe this in print." And so we wrote this little book, and we described, I think it was 5 different treks. And we wrote it on a river barge going down a tributary of the Amazon. Yeah. And George, my husband, is dyslexic, my then husband. Yeah. And so he sent it to his mother to retype with proper spelling. Actually, she didn't do a particularly good job with the spelling. There's some pretty bad spelling mistakes. But it sold because, and actually, yes, it was stapled. And but she had it printed in Boston because George is American. She lived in Boston. And people wanted more, so it started the publishing company.
Amazing. So, I mean, obviously there was a demand for the product that you spotted, and your whole life trajectory got changed in that moment. Because, Hilary, I know you were an eager traveller and an enthusiastic traveller, but I think somebody told me you were going to be an occupational therapist or something like that initially.
I was. That's what took me to South Africa, to Cape Town in 1974, because I needed to work. I needed a job. And I worked at a hospital called Conradi that dealt with spinal cord injuries. Yes. And it was, honestly, I can say truthfully, the most rewarding job I've ever had in occupational therapy. It was absolutely terrific. And so I was 1.5 years in Cape Town, which obviously was very different. That was the height of apartheid. But I must say, we absolutely loved it.
Fantastic. So there's a little bit of the snippet of the story that has a South African connection to it. Hilary, one thing to go from having one successful to a guide based on the trek that you've done, but quite another to build the travel publishing empire that followed and the string of guidebooks that have helped people on just about every continent ever since. Did it sort of happen organically? Did you say, well, the first one worked, let's go somewhere else and try it again? Or did you realize early on that this was something you were going to expand into a major organization and a sort of a planet-spreading span of books?
Well, certainly not the latter. Okay. No, everything happened accidentally. We did know we'd do a second book. The first one was about hiking in South America, so we were very keen to do a similar one on Africa. Okay. After our stay in Cape Town, we travelled from Cape Town to Cairo overland, with quite a few zigzags, always looking for new hiking routes, for new places to walk, but obviously also seeing what we could, wonderful wildlife and just everything about Africa in those days. And it was only, we then did another very simple book. And actually, we never had any money, so we couldn't afford to print the books because it's very expensive printing books. And so George went to work for a printer. He was a very bad employee. I seem to remember him ending up on the pavement with several boxes of books.
Oh dear.
But he was paid in books, not money. And
wow.
so we got our Backpackers Africa and a second edition of Peru and Bolivia.
Did you stick with the approach of very simple travel, of doing a lot on foot, of backpacking and hiking and sort of do-it-yourself travel? Or over the years, did you start allowing yourselves a little bit more luxury as you established the business and the brand grew?
Luxury, no.
Never. Okay.
No, we did. We stuck to our guns. I mean, not very profitable guns, I must say, of always doing hiking guides. So after Africa, we did North America, and then not all the rest of South America, but 4 other South American guides. And then we started to branch out. We realized that actually, if we wanted to make a living, it had to be more general guides. And also we started recruiting other writers and commissioning other writers. And just gradually it's expanded. We've now got more than 200 books on the list. And obviously, I'm now semi-retired. I'm still involved, but semi-retired.
Hilary, I don't want to preempt the book because listeners must go and buy a copy for themselves to read all the spectacular adventures contained therein. But let's just share 1 or 2 anecdotes with the audience. I mean, are there any adventures or particular trips that either went wrong in some way or which completely surprised you that turned out to be something you really weren't expecting them to be? When you look back on all the places you've been to, I mean, I don't know if you keep a count on the number of countries visited or anything like that, but which ones stand out for the unexpected or the strange things that happened on the way?
Well, an awful lot went wrong. I mean, just traveling through Africa in the 70s, it was a very different continent. We were arrested 3 times, which was irritating. And I think the stories are a bit too long to tell here, but we made the mistake of trying to go to a botanical garden in Entebbe in Uganda in 1976. And older listeners will remember the Entebbe raid.
Right, yes,
and
bad
so
timing.
we were arrested and we were held. It was very frightening, actually. We were held under machine gun guard for 3 hours, and I really did wonder what was going to happen to us. But the chap who was supposed to come and interview us had run out of petrol. And so the guard said, well, you must turn yourselves into the police station. This is how you walk to it, and they'll interview you. But we didn't. We went back to our hotel and we packed up very quickly and we left the country.
Okay,
yes.
Fair enough. I mean, I can't ask you to name a favorite destination because I'm sure that would be like asking somebody to choose between their favorite children. But of all the places that you have been, are there a couple that you have wanted to go back to multiple times because either you felt you didn't have a chance to explore everything they offered or because they just captured your heart in some way?
The one that's really captured my heart is Madagascar. And I did the first guide to Madagascar. It's now in its 13th edition. And I led tours to Madagascar for several years. And I do absolutely love it.
It's the most gorgeous country. It's one of my favourite destinations as well. And I've
Very
only
good
seen a
taste
little
you've
bit
got.
of it, but it was extraordinary. In terms of general travel advice, I mean, everybody has their own way of doing it and their own degree of luxury that they look for and the kind of destination. Some people like the cityscape, some like to be in the bush away from it all. But are there common threads in terms of things that you feel make travel easier? Are there sort of golden rules in terms of how you pack and what you take or what you don't take with you, Hilary, that over the years you have refined to a fine art?
Not really.
Not really.
I always say, if you're backpacking, if you're traveling adventurously, the most useful thing is a strong needle and dental floss because you can mend anything from the tent to your boots to clothes. It may not look very beautiful.
Just has to hold up. Yeah.
I think just travel with an open mind. Try not to compare it with your own culture, with your own way of life. And be open-minded. And, there's no point in traveling unless you're open-minded because otherwise you're looking for home in another country and that's not going to happen.
What's the point? Yeah. In South Africa, you also try not to think about the exchange rate too much while you're out there on the rand. I'll add to that. Any destinations you think are completely underrated that really people should go and visit? I mean, you've already mentioned Madagascar, but are there others that, and I almost hesitate to say this because sometimes those lovely undiscovered places are beautiful because they're undiscovered. But are there any that you would flag that you really think should have become a bigger travel destination than they have?
I think it's more the less known places in well-known countries. I mean, Peru, for instance, which I've been back many, many times, something like 25 times as a tour leader. Everyone goes to Cusco and Machu Picchu. Very few people go to the north of Peru, which is absolutely stunning, with some wonderful pre-Inca ruins, Cuelap, fantastic wildlife. And my passion now is wildlife because it's so chancy. And I told you earlier, I hope that I'm seeing pangolins on this trip in the Kalahari. So.
You will be so lucky if you do, because they are incredibly elusive. But I really, really wish for you that you might, Hilary. And if you do, it'll be just an enormous privilege because they are so rare to see. In all of my years of travel, I've never, ever seen one. I was talking about this at a pangolin conservation roundtable just last week. And it's a good segue into the conversation about responsible travel, because one of the things we were talking about that evening was how do you manage the visitor imprint on the place that they are visiting. And when it comes to pangolin tourism, it's about very careful management of how you engage, the distance you keep, discouraging people wanting to pick up the pangolins and take selfies with them is apparently a big problem. I mean, have you come across places or examples, let's say, either way, places that have handled the idea of responsible visitor experiences particularly well or particularly badly for that matter?
No, that's a very good question. I think that the key thing in responsible travel is vulnerable people, vulnerable tribal groups or whatever, are much more in danger of irresponsible tourism than most wildlife, because wildlife, and this is a very general statement, in national parks or reserves, tends to become used to tourists, used to visitors, whereas people are so vulnerable to tourists, well-meaning tourists giving them presents, giving them money, giving them sweets or whatever. But the point about wildlife is everyone now is so pushy in the way they want to see wildlife. And I subscribe to Africa Geographic, which is a wonderful publication. And they did a piece recently about the Masai Mara migration with the wildebeest and how cars are blocking the river there, so that the wildebeest can't cross in their usual crossing place. And it's irresponsible tour operators, perhaps, and guides who are letting tourists do that. And sometimes the tourists will do a bigger tip. Wealthy tourism is now much more happening, much more than it was in my day.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge, I know the management of whale watching tourism in South Africa, for example, is something that's got to be monitored so carefully and managed so carefully. We have strict rules in place about the distance that is meant to be kept. And yet, how often have I seen those photographs of, look, there was a whale right next to our boat. I'm thinking that's not anywhere near the 100 meters it was meant to be, for example. So I take your point. Hilary, Michelle has written in to say, I used Hilary's book on Madagascar, loved the country, and the book is full of hilarious notes from leeches to local taxis. You could write a book about the local taxis in Madagascar. Just them alone, Michelle, would be enough to fill a book. I can take your point on that one. So thank you for that. What advice would you give, Hilary, to somebody who's always dreamt of packing a bag and heading off to do something exciting, but has just never found the courage to do it? Do you think it's ever too late to start?
No, it is a just do it. We published an anthology. Unfortunately, it's out of print now, but it might be available secondhand. In fact, I think it is, called Roam Alone. And it was written specifically for people who've been nervous about travelling on their own, that maybe they're widowed or they split up with their partner or whatever reason. And it's different stories of different travellers who've been nervous, sat in the ladies' room in Heathrow just crying with nerves, and then had an absolutely fabulous trip. And one of the best quotes from there that someone told me was, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Oh, love
and
that.
I think that's perfect, because it is, we're all nervous travelling. I'm certainly still nervous, especially airports, and what stupid thing will I do, and will I lose my passport? But on the whole, it's always more exciting than better than you could ever imagine.
Yeah. I love that. Feel the fear and do it anyway.
Yes.
And I have quoted this before, but the one of the fastest growing categories of tourism globally is solo female travelers right now. Which is so exciting. I've done it a couple of times myself. I'm busy planning my next solo trip. And as much as I love traveling with my husband and my kids, there is something very, very special about doing it alone. And as you say, finding the courage to just go out there and do it. Just adds another dimension to the trip. I highly, highly recommend it.
Also, I think just butting in, we always think we're more vulnerable and more at risk as women. I don't think that's true, because sometimes you can play the vulnerability card. And that I was traveling alone in Colombia and quite a lot of Latin America. And people wanted to look after me, and they were lovely people. I met the most terrific people who just, oh no, you must come and stay with me. Oh no, it's much too risky for you to find a hotel on your own. Yeah. So you can either I can be very tough and look after myself, or I can be a little bit vulnerable if it's the right thing.
And I bet in cases like that, as you say, you're opening yourself to another layer of experience when you let other people in that way.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that, about the experience of the ordinary person in a place that you go to visit, because absolutely you can go and stay in a hotel and do a guided tour and see the sights of a place, but often it is the small, it's the cup of coffee you share with somebody in a cafe, or the person that you meet who changes the experience and just adds another layer to that travel. How much of your enjoyment of travel over the years, Hilary, has been about the people you've engaged with versus the places that you have been to?
It's been very much the people. I'm quite naturally shy, and actually George was such an extrovert. We travelled beautifully together because he would make the friends. I would value these new friends enormously, but I held back a little with the social engagement, whereas he always reached out. And the book is full of anecdotes of just wonderful, surprising people that we met. And there's one thing, and I describe it in the book, but one meeting which was just so special, because we were having a really horrible trip through the night in, I can't even remember, I think it was what's now Congo, was then Zaire. And the driver was really horrid. He wanted to put us off in the middle of a wilderness, because so we paid more money, all the usual thing. And so we were having a really unpleasant trip, and we were very cold in the back of a pickup truck. And then he stopped for a long time, about half an hour outside a house. We were sure he was seeing his girlfriend. But I remember, and I describe in the book, I saw him silhouetted in the doorway carrying 2 mugs, and they were full of hot milk that he handed to George and me.
Oh, sweet.
And that, it makes me choke up just thinking of it, because he'd been so unpleasant, and it was his, it's all right, we're friends.
And those are the moments you remember for the rest of your life, even if you can't necessarily remember which temple you visited or site you saw. It's those moments of contact. Having said that, one of our listeners would like to know, is there anywhere you would never go again, that you had such a terrible experience you vowed never to go back?
Well, I 3 years ago, I would have said Egypt, because it was right at the end of our trip. And it was, the Egyptians were very lustful, let's say. And we were travelling third-class trains, and they'd literally come pouring in through the windows, through the doors, and try and grab any part of me that they could. It was really unpleasant. And we'd almost run out of money by then. We'd been travelling for 11 months. And so I hated the Egyptians. Actually, I loved Egypt. I loved the ancient Egypt. But I went back to go to the island of Socotra, which is absolutely, my number one super place to go, which we can talk about in a minute. And stayed in Cairo. Absolutely loved the Egyptians, loved Cairo, loved everything about it. It's so good getting older. This is something I keep stressing. You're not a target for all these sexual advances, and it does make things so much easier.
Sandra writing in to say, my daughter travelled on her own to South America and North America when she was just 18. It was me who was nervous rather than her. Sandra just saying what a lovely guest you have today and enjoying the conversation with you, Hilary. Sandra, thank you for that. And I hope your daughter keeps on travelling and enjoying the adventure. Okay, so just before we must wrap up, Hilary, that island of Egypt I'd never heard of. Please tell us where to add to our travel bucket list.
Just before we wrap up, in case we don't fit it in, I am giving a talk at Exclusive Books, Cavendish, at 5:30
today.
Okay. So I want all the people who are enjoying me talking now come to that talk, please.
Please do, because then we'll leave it to you to go into detail about the island. Was it Socotra? You said Socotra. You'll have to go to Cavendish tonight to find out, or to go and get hold of a copy of Hilary's autobiography called "Taking the Risk: My Adventures in Travel and Publishing." Well, from all of the travellers that you have helped to guide through the experience, to get them there safely, to make sure they didn't miss all the amazing spaces and people, I think that's 50 years worth of thank yous to you. But my last question, which we must wrap up now, Hilary, is where to next? Are you still travelling? Do you have the next destination already in sight?
Not really, seeing pangolins, and it is a rescue operation, so that's why I'm optimistic. That's been my before I die thing. It's the only thing on my bucket list. Who knows? Socotra I didn't expect to go to, and then I suddenly thought, must do that before I die. So, as long as I don't die too soon, I probably will go to other places.
And please keep on telling the rest of us about them once you've done the initial exploration for us. Hilary Bradt, a real pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining us. And may you continue to wander the world with joy and a sense of adventure. It's been a real delight chatting to you on the show.
Thank you very much, Pippa.